Jerome Watts was 38 years old, and until that Tuesday evening, he believed his marriage was simply going through a rough patch. He was a senior logistics manager, the kind of man who rerouted $4 million freight shipments before sunrise without raising his voice. Steady, reliable, the person everyone called when something needed to be fixed quietly. His wife Adrienne called him something else entirely. Comfortable, but not ambitious. Good, but not enough. Then she left a FedEx envelope on the kitchen counter. A divorce petition. Filed 3 days before he even knew she'd seen a lawyer. Jerome stood in that kitchen for a long time, holding those papers in complete silence. But it wasn't the petition that changed everything. It was what he found 20 minutes later. 9 months of emails, still open on her laptop, that proved she hadn't just stopped loving him. She had been planning her exit with extraordinary precision, while he was still trying to find the right moment to tell her about his promotion. Adrienne was certain Jerome wouldn't fight. She had said so herself, in writing. She had been telling everyone she knew that she left Jerome, that she was moving forward, that he took it fine. 3 weeks later, Jerome walked into a restaurant with a woman who made Adrienne forget every word of that story. And what he did next, quietly, methodically, without a single wasted move, she never saw coming. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The phone rang at 4:47 in the morning. Jerome was already awake. He was already dressed. Dark slacks, pressed shirt, the same quiet uniform he wore every day. He was already at his desk in the small home office off the hallway. A cup of coffee going warm beside his keyboard. A spreadsheet open on his screen. He picked up on the second ring. "Talk to me, Dale." The voice on the other end was tight. Dale was a dispatcher out of Memphis, and Dale did not call before 5 in the morning unless something had gone sideways. Something had gone sideways. "We've got a carrier refusal on the Hendricks load," Dale said. "Drivers citing a weight violation at the Arkansas checkpoint. Whole thing's sitting at a truck stop off I-40. Clients expecting delivery by noon. $4 million in commercial HVAC equipment. 12 contractors waiting on a job site in Nashville." Jerome did not blink. "Pull Darren Mitchell off the Cookville run," Jerome said. "That load can flex to tomorrow. I already built the buffer. Get Mitchell to the truck stop, transfer the manifest, and call the checkpoint supervisor directly. His name is Reeves. Tell him Jerome Watts is handling it personally." A pause. "You sure Mitchell's got the clearance for—" "He recertified in February. It's in the system." Jerome clicked through 2 screens while he talked. "I'm emailing you the reroute confirmation right now. You'll have it before you hang up." Dale exhaled. "I don't know how you do this." Jerome didn't answer that. He sent the email. He hung up. He took a sip of his coffee. Outside the window, the neighborhood was still dark and perfectly quiet. The oak tree in the front yard stood motionless. The streetlight, 2 houses down, threw a pale circle on the empty road. Jerome looked at it for a moment, then turned back to his screen. This was his life. He had built it carefully, the way a man builds anything that's meant to last. One good decision stacked on top of another. Nothing wasted. Nothing neglected. The house was modest but immaculate. The gutters were clean. The lawn was edged. Every bill was paid before its due date. Every appliance serviced on schedule. Every minor repair handled on the weekend before it became a real problem. Jerome had grown up watching his father do the same. Gerald Watts, 31 years in the Union. A man who believed that how you maintained what you had was a direct reflection of your character. Jerome believed it too. His desk held 3 things: his monitor, his coffee mug, and a single framed photograph. Him and Adrienne at a resort in Negril, Jamaica. 3 years ago. Jerome was laughing at something. He couldn't even remember what now. Head tilted back, completely at ease. Adrian stood beside him in a yellow sundress, one hand on his arm, her eyes aimed just slightly past the camera. At the time, Jerome thought she was just squinting against the sun. He didn't think that anymore. The promotion letter had come on Friday. Director of Supply Chain Operations. Effective upon acceptance. 40% salary increase. Equity options that would vest over 3 years. His HR director had slid the folder across the desk with a look that said, this was not a negotiation. This was a recognition. Jerome had driven home with the folder on the passenger seat and a specific kind of satisfaction sitting quietly in his chest. Not pride, exactly. More like confirmation. He had put in 15 years of steady, competent work, and the work had spoken for itself, the way he always believed it would. He wanted to tell Adrian over dinner, maybe open a bottle of the good wine she kept for special occasions, watch her face when she understood what it meant for them, for the next phase of everything they had been building together. He was still waiting for the right moment. She came home at 6:40 that evening, in a black wrap dress and heels Jerome didn't recognize. "Hey," she said, not quite looking at him. She set her bag on the entryway table and checked something on her phone. "Hey," Jerome said. He was standing in the kitchen. He had made dinner. Nothing complicated, just the lemon chicken she used to ask for. "You eat yet?" "I'm heading out, actually." "Networking thing." She was already moving toward the hallway mirror, touching her earring. "Don't wait up." He watched her go. He heard the click of the front door. He stood in the kitchen for a moment. The chicken sat on the stove. The table was set for 2. He put one setting away. He ate alone. This was not the first time. It had become its own kind of routine over the past few months. The going out, the late returns, the way she moved through their shared spaces like she was passing through a hotel lobby. Jerome had been trying to name what he was feeling for weeks. Not quite worry, not quite suspicion. Something more like the sense that a door had been left open somewhere, and a cold draft was moving through the house, and he couldn't find which room it was coming from. He cleaned up after dinner. He checked the locks. He turned off the kitchen light. The FedEx envelope was on the counter by the toaster. His name on the label. He didn't recognize the return address. He opened it. The words, "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage," sat at the top of the first page in clean, formal type. Filed 3 days ago. Jerome stood in the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. The clock above the stove marked the seconds. He did not move. He did not make a sound. He just stood there, holding the papers, in a house that had never felt so quiet. She came home at 11:14. Jerome heard the key in the lock, heard the soft click of the door, heard her heels on the hardwood. He did not move. He was sitting at the kitchen table the same way he had been sitting for the past 4 hours, back straight, hands folded in front of him, the divorce petition laid flat on the table like a document waiting to be reviewed. 2 cups of coffee sat beside it. He had made them out of habit, then forgotten them entirely. They had gone cold long ago. Adrienne stopped in the kitchen doorway. She saw the papers first. Then she saw him. For just a moment, one small, unguarded moment, something moved across her face. Then it was gone, smoothed over, replaced by a look Jerome couldn't quite read. She set her purse on the counter. She didn't apologize for the hour. She didn't ask how he was. She walked to the far side of the table and stood there, like she had already decided where she was safest in the room. Jerome looked at her. He kept his voice level. "How long have you been planning this?" Adrienne pulled out the chair across from him and sat down slowly. She folded her hands on the table, and then she began to talk. It came out smooth, too smooth. She'd been unhappy for years. Not with him specifically, she was careful to say, but with the shape of her life, the direction things were going. She needed room to grow. She needed to be around people who were moving forward. Jerome was stable, she said. He was dependable. But stable and dependable weren't the same as driven, and she needed someone driven, someone who matched her ambitions. Jerome listened to all of it without saying a word. Then she said the thing that would stay with him for a long time after that night. "You're a good man, Jerome. I want you to know that. But good isn't enough anymore. I need someone who matches where I'm going." The kitchen was very quiet. Jerome looked at her for a moment. Then he asked the only question that actually mattered. "Is there someone else?" 1 second passed. It was just 1 second. But Jerome had spent 8 years learning the rhythm of this woman, the way she breathed before she answered, the way her eyes moved when she was deciding something. And that 1 second told him everything he needed to know before she ever opened her mouth. "No," she said. Jerome nodded slowly. "Okay." He pushed back from the table and stood up. "I'll take the guest room." That was it. No raised voice, no slammed door, no sharp words thrown across the table for her to carry upstairs with her. He just stood, picked up his coffee cup, and moved toward the sink. He heard Adrienne shift in her chair behind him. He could feel her waiting for something. Some eruption, some fracture, some proof that she had mattered enough to break him open. The silence seemed to unsettle her more than any argument would have. She said his name once, softly, like a question. He rinsed his cup. He set it in the drying rack. "Get some rest," he said. He didn't turn around. He listened to her footsteps move down the hall and up the stairs. He listened to the soft sound of their bedroom door closing. Then he turned around. Her laptop was on the kitchen counter. She had left it there earlier in the week, and it had barely moved since. She mostly used her phone. The screen had gone dim, but not dark. Still logged in. The small indicator light pulsed a faint, steady white in the dark kitchen. Jerome stood there for a moment. He wasn't looking for anything. He told himself that plainly. But he walked to the counter, and he tapped the touchpad, and the screen came back to life. Her email was open. He found the thread in under 4 minutes. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't in a folder. It was sitting right there in her inbox the way a thing sits when someone has stopped worrying about being caught. Dominic Frazier. The name appeared again and again, going back 9 months. Jerome read without rushing. He read every word. The messages were affectionate in the early months, then explicit, then comfortable. The casual intimacy of two people who had stopped performing and started settling in. Near the top of the thread, a message from Dominic, sent 2 weeks ago. "Once you're free, we won't have to hide anymore. I'm not going anywhere." And below it, Adrienne's reply, "I know. He won't fight it. Jerome doesn't fight for things." Jerome read that line twice. Then he took out his phone. He photographed every screen, one by one, methodical and thorough. He emailed everything to himself. He checked that each image had sent. Then he closed every tab, returned the screen to exactly the brightness he'd found it, and stepped back from the counter. He picked up the second cold cup of coffee. He sat back down at the kitchen table. He drank it slowly. His face was unreadable. He began to think. Jerome was up at 5:15. He showered, shaved, and dressed without making noise. Dark slacks, a pressed gray shirt. He moved through the morning routine the same way he moved through everything. Steady, quiet, one thing at a time. He made coffee. He drank it, standing at the kitchen counter. He rinsed the cup and set it in the rack. Adrienne's door was closed when he walked down the hall. He did not stop. He picked up his keys, picked up his briefcase, and walked out of the house. He went to work. 2 days later, he sat across a desk from Portia Wells. Her office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown. Clean lines, good light, the kind of space that said serious without having to announce it. Portia herself was compact and precise, maybe 50, with reading glasses she took on and off like punctuation. She had been recommended to Jerome by his company's HR director, who had said simply, "She doesn't lose." Jerome set a manila folder on the desk in front of her. Inside, 8 years of joint account records organized by year. Mortgage contribution breakdowns. A personal loan summary, $15,000 extended to Adrienne's sister. Never repaid, documented. His salary history, Adrienne's. And at the back, printed on plain paper, every email from the Dominic Fraser thread. Photographs, not screenshots, clear, dated, time-stamped. Portia picked up the folder and read in silence. She turned pages the way a doctor reads a chart. No reaction, just intake. After a few minutes, she took off her glasses and looked at him. "How long ago did you find out she filed?" "5 days," Jerome said. Portia set the folder down. "Mr. Watts, I have clients who walk in here 3 months after the fact and aren't half this organized." "I like to be prepared," Jerome said. She almost smiled. "I can see that." They talked for an hour. By the end of the meeting, Jerome had retained her, signed the paperwork, and answered every question she put to him without hesitation. He left the building, walked to his truck, and drove back to the office. He had a shipment to reroute. His company had been asking him to attend the Southeast Logistics Conference in Atlanta for 2 years running. Both times, Jerome had declined. Too much going on, couldn't leave mid-quarter. When the invitation landed in his inbox again that Thursday, his first instinct was the same. He stared at it for a moment. Then he hit confirm. He packed a bag that evening. He did not tell Adrienne he was going. He left a note on the kitchen counter that said he would be out of town for 2 days on work travel, and that was all it needed to say. The conference was held at a hotel near Midtown Atlanta. Big, efficient, full of people in lanyards talking too loud over rubber chicken dinners. Jerome attended the sessions he was there to attend, took the notes worth taking, and kept mostly to himself. The second night's dinner was assigned seating. He found his name card at a round table near the back of the ballroom and sat down. Across from him, already seated and already engaged with the breadbasket, without any apparent guilt about it, was a woman in a deep green dress who introduced herself as Nadia Pierre, structural engineer, Atlanta-based firm with projects across 4 states. She was there because 2 of her current projects had significant freight logistics components, and her firm had decided, finally, that it was worth understanding that side of the operation from the inside. "So you're doing reconnaissance," Jerome said. "I prefer research. Reconnaissance sounds like I'm wearing a wire." He laughed. It surprised him, the ease of it. They talked for 3 hours, not about anything personal, about load distribution and infrastructure tolerances and the specific headache of coordinating material deliveries on bridge rehabilitation projects in mid-sized metro areas. She knew things he didn't. He knew things she didn't. The conversation kept finding new rooms to walk into, and neither of them seemed in any hurry to leave. She had a laugh that didn't ask permission. She made a point, and then waited to see if you'd actually heard it before she kept going. She was sharp without being sharp about it. The kind of person who didn't need to tell you she was smart, because it was already just there, in the room, self-evident. When the dinner ended, they exchanged business cards because the conversation made it obvious they should. Jerome drove back to his hotel room, set the card on the nightstand, and slept better than he had in 2 weeks. Back home, Adrienne had been busy. She had called her sister. She had called 2 of their mutual friends, a couple named the Hendersons, and a woman named Gwen, who taught yoga, and repeated everything she heard. She had framed the story carefully. She had made the decision. She was moving forward. Jerome had taken it well. She was doing what was right for her. She deserved to be happy. She posted a quote online about new chapters. She looked, to anyone watching, like a woman who had made peace with a hard choice and was walking confidently into what came next. Jerome was not watching. Jerome was working. 11 days after Atlanta, his cell phone rang at noon on a Tuesday. He was at his desk, halfway through a vendor contract review. Nadia Pierre. He picked up. She had a question about freight staging timelines for a project in Savannah. A legitimate question, specific and technical, and he answered it completely. Then they kept talking. The conversation moved from Savannah to supply chain modeling to a disagreement about a paper they'd both apparently read on port infrastructure efficiency. And, somewhere in the middle of all of that, 90 minutes had passed. There was a pause. Not an uncomfortable one. "I'd like to take you to dinner," Nadia said, "if you're open to it." Jerome leaned back in his chair. Outside his office window, the afternoon was flat and gray and ordinary. "Yeah," he said. "I'm open to it." They went to a restaurant in Midtown the following Saturday. A small Italian place, unhurried, good light. Jerome was easy company, and so was she. He told her about the divorce. Not all of it. Not yet. But enough. She listened without filling the space with reassurances. She just listened. And then she asked one question that was exactly the right question, and they moved on. By the end of the night, they had plans to do it again. 3 weeks after Adrian filed the divorce papers, Jerome and Nadia were seated near the window of a restaurant on the east side of the city when the door opened and Adrian walked in. Jerome saw her before she saw him. She was with a woman from her office. A work dinner by the look of it. She was dressed well. She looked composed. She scanned the room the way a person does when they're being seated. And then her eyes landed on Jerome, and then moved to the woman sitting across from him, and then came back to Jerome. She stopped moving for just a moment, just one. Jerome raised one hand in a brief, unhurried wave. Adrienne crossed the room. Jerome stood. He made the introduction simply, without ceremony. "Adrienne, this is Nadia." "Nadia." "Adrienne." Nadia looked up from her menu and offered a warm, easy smile. "Nice to meet you," she said. And she meant it. There was no performance in it, no sharpness underneath. She was completely unbothered, the way a person is unbothered when they have absolutely nothing to prove. Adrienne said it was nice to meet her too. Her voice was even. Her face was composed, but her eyes moved over Nadia in a way she couldn't fully control, and Jerome watched the math happening behind them. The quick, involuntary calculation, the result she did not like. "Enjoy your dinner," Jerome said. Adrienne said, of course, yes, they would. She smiled. She walked to her table. Jerome sat back down. Nadia was already reading the menu again. "The lamb looks good," she said. "Do you eat lamb?" "I do," Jerome said. "Good," she said. "I was going to order it either way, but it's better if there's someone to share with." That night, Jerome's phone rang at 10:47. He was already in bed, already settled, the lamp on the nightstand still burning. He looked at the screen. "Adrienne." He answered. Her voice had lost its composure. Not by much, but enough. She said she'd been thinking. She said maybe things were moving too fast, that they could slow down, that there was no reason they couldn't take a breath and talk. Really talk, the way they maybe should have before any of this. Jerome let her finish. "The papers are already filed, Adrienne," he said. "I'll see you at mediation." He hung up. He set the phone face down on the nightstand. He reached over and turned off the lamp. He went to sleep. Camille Okafor had been calling since the Tuesday Jerome found the envelope. He had answered twice. Brief calls, enough to let her know he was standing. Both times she had said the same thing. Come to dinner. Both times he had said soon. After Adrienne's call on Saturday night, he texted Camille one word, tomorrow, and she had sent back a single thumbs up, which was the most restrained thing Camille Okafor had ever communicated in her life. She lived 20 minutes away in a brick bungalow she'd bought and renovated herself, piece by piece, over 4 years. The porch light was already on when Jerome pulled up. The smell of food reached him before he even got to the door. She opened it before he knocked. "Sit down," she said, and turned back toward the kitchen. He sat. The table was already set. A pot of something good was on the stove. Camille moved around her kitchen the way she moved through everything, fast, purposeful, no wasted motion. She set a bowl in front of him and sat down across from him with her own, and she looked at him with the particular patience of someone who had decided in advance not to rush this. "Okay," she said. "Go." He went. He told her everything in the order it happened. The envelope, the cold coffee, what Adrian said and how she said it. The 1 second of hesitation when he asked if there was someone else. The laptop on the counter. What he found in the emails. Dominic Frazier's name. The screenshots. Portia Wells and the first meeting. Atlanta. Nadia. The restaurant. The phone call Saturday night. He spoke steadily and without drama, the way he always did. Camille ate and listened. She did not interrupt once, which was, as Jerome had noted to himself on the drive over, genuinely unusual for her. She waited until his voice settled into silence, and he picked up his spoon for the first time. Then she asked her question. "What do you actually know about this Dominic?" Jerome thought about it. Sales director at a competing firm. Drives a Porsche. Has a downtown high-rise condo. He's all over Instagram. Travel, restaurants, the whole thing. Looks like a man who's very happy with how he looks. Camille nodded slowly. She set her spoon down and crossed her arms on the table. 2 years ago, she said, I had a client, a woman. She had been engaged to a man in regional sales, mid-40s, downtown address, very image-conscious. The engagement ended badly. She paused. Financially badly. She hired me to help her understand some account activity she'd been added to during the relationship and then quietly removed from before the breakup. It was a mess. Jerome looked at her. You think it was the same man. I can't tell you that. I can't share anything about a client's situation. She held his gaze. But I can do my own research, independently, as a professional who's been asked a question. Jerome said nothing. He just watched her. Give me a week, she said. She called him 7 days later and told him to come back. No food this time. Just the two of them at her kitchen table, and a manila folder sitting between them, thick with printed pages. Camille opened it herself and walked him through it the way she walked clients through an audit, sequentially, without editorializing, letting the numbers carry their own weight. Dominic Frazier's condo was a rental, a high-end building, a top-floor unit with a view, and a lease agreement that had been renewed twice, meaning there was no ownership, no equity, no stake in anything. The Porsche was leased as well, and the leasing company had issued 3 missed payment notices in the past 8 months. There were 2 active civil lawsuits in the public record, both filed by former business partners, both citing breach of contract and misappropriated funds. The suits were still pending. The amounts were not small. Jerome studied each page without speaking. There's more, Camille said. She turned to the last section of the file. Financial transaction records. Account activity traced through a combination of public filings and business disclosures. Over the past 6 months, Dominic had made 8 transfers totaling just over $22,000 to an account registered under the name T. Frazier. Jerome looked up. Wife? He said. Ex-wife? I don't know, Camille said flatly. The records don't say. Could be either. Could be something else entirely. She tapped the page. But it's documented. The transfers are real. The name is real. Whatever that account is, he's been feeding it steadily. Jerome stared at the page for a long moment. Then he closed the folder. He picked it up and held it evenly in both hands, the way you hold something you intend to keep safe. Thank you, he said. Are you going to use it? Not yet. Camille looked at him steadily. She nodded once. That was all. He drove home in the dark, the folder on the passenger seat beside him. He did not turn on the radio. The city moved past the windows. Lights, intersections, ordinary Tuesday traffic, and Jerome drove through it in silence. He did not open the folder again that night. He set it on his desk, squared its edges against the corner, and left it there. He simply knew it existed. The conference room was on the 14th floor of a building downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city skyline. The table was long and dark wood and very clean. A water pitcher sat at the center of it, untouched. Jerome arrived 4 minutes early. Adrienne was already there. She was seated on the far side of the table with her attorney, a tall man in a charcoal suit named Barrett, who had the particular stillness of someone paid very well to look unimpressed. Adrienne wore a blazer Jerome had never seen before. Her hair was done. She looked like a woman arriving for something she expected to win. She met Jerome's eyes when he walked in. She didn't smile. Neither did he. Portia Wells set her briefcase on the table beside Jerome and opened it without ceremony. She was smaller than most people expected, with close-cropped natural hair and reading glasses she wore pushed up on her forehead until she needed them. She did not do small talk. Jerome respected that about her. The mediator, a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Renee Cole, opened the session and outlined the process. Jerome already knew the process. He'd read about it. He folded his hands on the table and listened anyway. Barrett presented Adrienne's proposed settlement in the language of fairness. His voice was smooth and measured, the kind of voice built for conference rooms. The house, which he called the marital home, would transfer to Adrienne. Jerome's 401k would be split evenly. Any performance bonus Jerome received in the current fiscal year would be subject to a 30% distribution to Adrienne, given that the marital standard of living had been supported by his income throughout their marriage. Barrett used the phrase equitable outcome 3 times in 4 minutes. Jerome did not move. He did not write anything down. He looked at the table and listened. Portia let Barrett finish. She gave it 2 seconds of silence after he stopped talking, just enough to let everything he said settle into the room. Then she opened her folder. "Thank you," she said, pleasantly. "Let's look at the actual numbers." She went through it in order. First, mortgage contribution records spanning 8 years, pulled from bank statements and organized by year. Jerome had covered 74% of all mortgage payments over the life of the loan. Not half, not the majority, nearly 3/4, consistently, documented to the month. Barrett's expression didn't change. Adrienne's did, just slightly, just around the eyes. Second, a personal loan of $15,000 extended by Jerome to Adrienne's sister in 2021 with a signed acknowledgement of debt and a repayment schedule both parties had agreed to in writing. 0 payments had been made. The debt remained in full. Third, Portia placed a single page at the center of the table and slid it toward the mediator. "Joint investment account," she said, "opened jointly in 2019. In the 14 months prior to the divorce filing, the account lost 63% of its total value, not through market loss, but through direct withdrawals." She tapped the page. The withdrawals began 4 months before Mrs. Watts filed. The account was effectively drained before Mr. Watts was served. The room was quiet. Adrienne's attorney leaned in and studied the page. He said something close to Adrienne's ear that Jerome couldn't hear. Whatever it was, it didn't help her face. "We'd like to request a brief recess," Barrett said. Dr. Cole nodded. 15 minutes. Jerome walked to the end of the hallway and stood at the window with a paper cup of water he didn't drink. He looked out at the city. The streets 14 floors below were full of ordinary traffic. Ordinary Tuesday people going somewhere. Ordinary. He watched them. He heard her heels on the floor before she spoke. "Jerome." He turned. Adrienne had followed him down the hallway alone. Barrett was still in the conference room. Out here, away from the table, something about her posture had changed. The Polish was still there, but the certainty behind it was gone. And without that certainty, she looked like someone standing in weather she hadn't dressed for. "I didn't want it to go like this," she said. Her voice was quieter than it had been all morning. "I really didn't." Jerome looked at her. "Then why are you making it so difficult?" she asked. He let the question sit for a moment, not to be dramatic, just because he wanted to be sure of his words before he used them. "I'm not making it difficult, Adrienne," he said. "I'm making it accurate." He turned and walked back down the hallway. He pulled open the conference room door and sat down in his chair. He poured himself a glass of water from the pitcher at the center of the table and drank it while he waited for everyone else to return. The session ended without resolution. A second date was scheduled. In the parking lot, Jerome shook Portia's hand. She said a few things about next steps. He listened, asked one question, and thanked her. He got in his truck. He drove directly to the office. He did not call anyone. He did not stop somewhere to sit with it. He pulled into the parking structure, took the elevator up, sat down at his desk, and opened the freight report that had been waiting for him since morning. He worked until 6. Jerome got home from the office at 6:15, changed out of his work clothes, and ate a bowl of leftover rice and chicken standing at the kitchen counter. Then he washed the bowl, dried it, and put it away. Then he sat down at the kitchen table and called Theo Maddox. Theo was a vendor contracts manager at a regional freight company in Charlotte. They'd worked adjacent to each other for years. Not close friends, but the kind of professional contact built on mutual respect and enough shared work to create trust. Theo answered on the second ring. "Watts, what's going on?" "I have a question," Jerome said. "Dominic Frazier, Regional Sales Director at Meridian Distribution. You've worked with them." A short pause. "Yeah. Why? What do you know about him?" Another pause, longer this time. Jerome could hear Theo shifting, the sound of someone deciding how much to say. "That's an interesting name to be asking about," Theo said carefully. "I know." Theo was quiet for a moment. Then, "Look, I can't get into specifics. You understand that." "I do. But I'll say this." Theo's voice dropped slightly. Not conspiratorial, just measured. "If somebody I cared about was making any kind of long-term decisions based on that man's situation, I'd want them to know that his situation is not what it looks like, and that people at his company are aware of that. Internally." Jerome said nothing. "That's all I can say," Theo said. "That's enough," Jerome said. "I appreciate it." He hung up. He set the phone on the table. He sat with it for a minute, the quiet confirmation of a thing he had already believed to be true, now solid enough to hold. He didn't write anything down. He didn't need to. He simply filed it in the same place he'd been filing everything else, in the organized and patient part of his mind, where nothing got lost. Then he went to bed. The calls came on Wednesday and Thursday. Marcus first, a friend from a couple Jerome and Adrienne had spent time with over the years, golfed with once, had dinner with maybe 4 times. Marcus led with concern, asking how Jerome was holding up, saying he'd heard things were rough. His questions were just slightly too specific. He knew about the mediation. He knew about the scheduling. Jerome answered simply and without detail. He said he was doing fine. He said the process was moving. He said he appreciated Marcus thinking of him. Marcus seemed unsatisfied with this, which told Jerome everything. Diane called Thursday, a woman from a shared friend group, warm enough on the surface, someone Adrienne had always been closer to than Jerome was. Diane said she was calling just to check in, that she hoped Jerome wasn't carrying too much alone, that she was there if he needed to talk. Jerome thanked her. He said he wasn't carrying too much. He said things were being handled. He knew what these calls were. He had seen the pattern at work. When someone is trying to get a read on a situation without appearing to, they send people who seem neutral. They always seem neutral. Jerome recognized it the same way he recognized when a supply chain was being probed before a disruption. He gave them nothing. He was kind about it, but he gave them nothing. Sunday morning, he drove to his father's house. Gerald Watts lived in the same house he'd bought in 1987. A brick ranch on a quiet street with a yard he still maintained himself, despite what his knees said about it. Jerome had been coming here every Sunday he was in the city for 12 years. Longer if you counted childhood. The ritual had not changed. Gerald made coffee. They sat. They didn't force conversation. They were on the back porch, 2 mugs between them, when Gerald set his down and looked at Jerome with the particular expression that meant he had decided something. "There's something I should have told you," Gerald said. "I've been working up to it." Jerome looked at him and waited. Gerald folded his hands on his knee. 3 years ago, your mother's birthday, we had that gathering here." He paused. "I went to get a jacket from the back bedroom. The door wasn't fully shut. Adrienne was in there on the phone. Jerome was still. She didn't hear me," Gerald continued. "I wasn't trying to listen, but I heard her say—" He stopped. He set his jaw. "She said she'd know when it was time to leave. She said she just had to wait until the timing was right for her." The porch was quiet. A car passed on the street in front of the house. Neither of them looked toward it. "I told myself I'd misheard," Gerald said. "I spent a long time telling myself that." His voice was steady, but there was something underneath it that caused him to say, "I didn't mishear." Jerome looked at his father. "I know you didn't." Gerald nodded once. He picked up his coffee mug. He didn't say anything else, because there wasn't anything else to say. And both of them knew it. They sat on the porch until the coffee was gone. Jerome sat in the truck in Gerald's driveway for 15 minutes before he could make himself drive. He wasn't crying. He wasn't angry. Or not exactly. What he was, he didn't have a clean word for. It was the feeling of a shape becoming clear that had always been there, just past the edge of what he'd been willing to see. The marriage wasn't something that had gone wrong. It wasn't a failure, or a distance that had grown, or 2 people who had drifted apart. It had been a calculation. From somewhere far back, further than the emails, further than Dominic, it had been a clock, running on a schedule that only Adrienne could read. She had been waiting. The whole time, she had been waiting. He pulled into his own driveway and sat in the dark truck for another moment. The house was quiet. The street lamp threw a pale square of light across the front door. He went inside. Jerome signed the paperwork at 8:47 on Monday morning. His manager, David Reyes, had the folder ready on the conference room table when Jerome arrived. Clean pages, 2 blue pens, a handshake that came with genuine warmth. David said something about the company being fortunate to have him. Jerome thanked him. He meant it, but he didn't linger on it. He signed where he was supposed to sign, shook the hand again, and went back to his desk. Director of Supply Chain Operations, effective immediately. He called his father from the parking garage at lunch. Gerald picked up on the 3rd ring, and Jerome told him in 2 sentences. Gerald said, "Good." Then he said, "You earned that." Then the line went quiet in the way it did when Gerald was finished, and didn't feel the need to fill the air. Jerome understood. That was enough. He texted Camille from the elevator. "Got the promotion. Signed this morning." Her reply came back in under a minute. "I know that's right. Dinner. This week. Don't argue with me." He smiled at the phone. He did not argue. He told no one else. He and Nadia had fallen into a rhythm without trying to. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't strategic. It was 2 people who found each other genuinely interesting and kept showing up because of that, which is a simpler thing than it sometimes sounds. They had dinner twice in the first week after her call, once the week after that, and then it became a loose, comfortable pattern. A Tuesday here, a Saturday there, an occasional long phone call when the week got full and the schedules didn't line up. She knew about the divorce. He had told her early and plainly not to explain himself, just because it was true, and she deserved the context. She had listened without expression, nodded once, and said, "Okay." That was all. She did not press for details, did not offer opinions on Adrienne, did not make it the subject of any conversation that followed. She simply folded it into what she knew about him and kept going. And that restraint, that clean, uncomplicated respect, was something Jerome noticed every time. There was no rush between them, no urgency that felt like it came from somewhere wounded. They were both careful people who had learned to build carefully, and the thing between them was being built the same way, one honest conversation at a time, on a foundation that actually held weight. On Thursday, Jerome sat down at the kitchen table with everything spread in front of him. Camille's file was on the left, printed, tabbed, organized by category. The Porsche lease documents, the missed payment records, the civil suit filings, the account transfer records for T. Frazier. Each section clean behind its own tab. The screenshots from Adrienne's laptop were in the middle, printed and dated, paper-clipped in chronological order. 9 months of messages, the language between them clear and deliberate. He won't fight it. Jerome doesn't fight for things. He read that line one more time. He set the page face down. To the right, the investment account records showing the liquidations Porsche had already used once and would use again. The record of the personal loan to Adrienne's sister, still unreturned. And one more thing. A single handwritten note Jerome had written himself, 2 pages, detailing what his father Gerald had told him on the back porch. The date, the gathering, the exact words Gerald remembered hearing. Signed at the bottom in Gerald's handwriting, which Jerome had asked for quietly, and which Gerald had provided without hesitation. He squared the edges of everything. He placed it all in a single manila folder. He sealed it with a binder clip. The next morning, he drove to Portia's office and set it on her desk. "I want this done at the next session," he said. "Not extended." "Done." Portia opened the folder. She took her time with it, reading each section slowly, turning pages without rushing. Jerome sat in the chair across from her and waited. When she looked up, her expression was composed, but there was something behind her eyes that might have been professional admiration. "You have more than enough," she said. "I know." She tapped the edge of the folder. "Most clients don't come in like this. Even the organized ones." "She assumed I wouldn't," Jerome said. "I needed her to know she was wrong. Not just about some of it, about all of it." Portia looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded, slow and certain. "Second session," she said. "Next Thursday. I'll have everything prepared." Jerome stood, buttoned his jacket, and thanked her. He called Nadia from the parking lot before he pulled out. "You free for dinner tonight?" "I can be," she said. "Give me until 7. 7 works." They met at a small place across town. Dark wood tables, low lighting, no noise. Nadia was already there when he arrived, her jacket folded over the back of her chair, a glass of water in front of her, reading something on her phone that she put away the moment she saw him. They ordered. The food came. She told him about the infrastructure project, a drainage overhaul for a city corridor that kept flooding every spring. The kind of work that most people ignored until something broke. He asked the right questions. She answered the way she always did, with precision and something close to joy. He told her about the promotion. She smiled. Not the polished kind, the real kind, the one that reached her eyes. "Director," she said. "That's a big title." "It's a big job," he said. "I'll figure it out." She laughed. He did too. Neither of them mentioned Adrienne. Jerome and Portia arrived at the building at 9:12 a.m. They didn't rush. They walked from the parking garage at an even pace, Portia with her leather case at her side, Jerome with the manila folder tucked under one arm. The lobby was marble and fluorescent, the kind of space designed to feel official. Their footsteps were quiet on the polished floor. The mediation suite was on the 4th floor. When they came through the door, Adrienne was already seated on the far side of the long table. She looked composed. More than last time. She had her posture back, shoulders settled, hands folded neatly in front of her, a small professional smile that she deployed when the door opened. Her attorney, A compact man in a gray suit named Holt sat to her left with his own folder open. Adrienne looked like a woman who had spent the past 2 weeks convincing herself she had misread the first session, like she had decided Jerome had been bluffing. Jerome took his seat. He set the manila folder flat on the table in front of him and folded his hands on top of it. He did not smile. He did not glare. He simply settled. Portia opened her case. She began without preamble. The first document she placed on the table was the investment account record, a clean printout showing the joint account balance as of 11 months ago, and then a second printout showing 4 systematic withdrawals made over a 4-month window, all of them initiated by Adrienne, totaling just over $31,000. All of it moved before the divorce petition was ever filed. Holt looked at the papers. He wrote something on his notepad. The second document was the loan record. Jerome's bank transfer to Adrienne's sister, dated 4 years ago, $15,000, with no record of repayment in any subsequent joint statement. The third was Camille's forensic accounting summary. It was 12 pages. Portia let Holt take his time with it. The summary was precise and specific. Mortgage contribution percentages broken down by year. Joint asset accumulation charted against each party's documented income. A clear and factual picture of who had built what, and by how much. Jerome had contributed 74% of the mortgage over 8 years. The numbers did not argue. They simply sat there. Then Portia placed the emails on the table. Not all of them. A selection. Printed, dated, arranged in chronological order. The earliest one was from 9 months before the divorce filing. The language was unmistakable. The thread ran clear and unbroken from that first message all the way to the week before Adrienne handed Jerome the FedEx envelope. Adrienne's composure did not shatter, but something behind her eyes went still in a way that was different from calm. Holt asked for a recess 8 minutes in. They came back to the table 12 minutes later. Adrienne sat down without looking at Jerome. Holt adjusted his tie. Portia gathered her documents into a neat stack and set them to the side. Jerome spoke. "I'd like to address the table directly," he said. Portia nodded. The mediator, a quiet woman in her 50s named Dr. Parrish, who had barely spoken, indicated her agreement and noted it for the record. Jerome did not stand. He stayed seated, his voice even, his hands still. "I'm not here to make this difficult," he said. "I want to be clear about that. I'm here to be accurate." He looked at Dr. Parrish, not at Adrienne. "Everything in that documentation is verifiable. I'm not asking for anything I didn't build. What I'm asking for is proportional to what I contributed. And what I contributed is on the record." He laid out his terms plainly, the way he would lay out a logistics plan. Methodically, without emotion, nothing hidden. A fair split of the 401k, accounting for the disparity in contributions. A release of any claim on his current fiscal year earnings, including any bonus, repayment of the personal loan, or its deduction from settlement assets. Mutual release of all future financial claims. "And the house?" he said. He said it simply. No edge in his voice, just the weight of a fact. "That's the only term that isn't negotiable." Holt leaned toward Adrienne. They spoke in low tones for a long moment, too quiet to hear, but Jerome could read the shape of it. Holt's expression was the expression of a man explaining mathematics to someone who had been expecting a different answer. Adrienne picked up the pen. She signed where she was told to sign. She did not look across the table while she did it. Dr. Parrish noted the agreement for the record. Portia began gathering her documents. Chairs shifted. Jackets were buttoned. Cases were snapped shut. The room began to move. Jerome stood and picked up his folder. Adrienne spoke when there was no one close enough to hear it. "I didn't think you'd do all of this." Her voice was quiet. It wasn't for Holt. It wasn't for Portia. It wasn't for the record. Jerome looked at her. He took in the whole of her, the polished surface, the composed face, the woman who had spent 9 months calculating what she believed he was and was not capable of. He held her gaze for a long moment. "I know," he said. He picked up his folder and walked out of the building ahead of her. 2 weeks passed. The divorce was finalized on a Thursday. Jerome signed the last document in Portia's office at 2:15 in the afternoon, shook her hand, and drove straight to work. He stayed until 6. He finished a routing analysis he'd been building all week and sent it to his team before he shut his computer down. On Sunday, he drove to his parents' house. He did this every week. Had done it through the mediation, through the conference in Atlanta, through every quiet and difficult thing the past few months had carried. The Sunday dinner at Gerald and Paulette's house on Devereux Street was the one thing he had not allowed to move. Paulette had made short ribs. The smell hit him in the driveway. Jerome came through the side door, kissed his mother on the cheek, and sat at the kitchen counter while she moved around the stove the way she always had. Unhurried, certain, every motion practiced over decades. Gerald was in the living room with the television on low. He lifted his chin when Jerome came through. That was enough. They were 40 minutes from sitting down when the house phone rang. Gerald answered it in the living room. Jerome heard the register of his voice change, not alarmed, but careful. A single pause. Then Gerald appeared in the kitchen doorway, the receiver at his side. "It's Edna," he said. "She wants to come over." Jerome looked up from his coffee. He thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "Let her," he said. Edna Holloway arrived 22 minutes later. She was a small woman, well-dressed even on a Sunday, with Adrienne's same careful posture and none of Adrienne's performance. She came in through the front door, hugged Paulette the way women who have been friends for 20 years hug, long and without ceremony, and then turned to face Jerome. She looked tired. Not the tired of a long day, the tired of something she'd been carrying. "Jerome," she said. "Edna." They sat in the living room. Paulette brought sweet tea. Gerald took his chair in the corner. The television was off. Edna set her purse on her knees and folded her hands over it. "I want you to know," she started, "that I didn't know about the other man. Not until recently." She said it quietly, without decoration. "I want you to know that." Jerome nodded once. "Adrienne is going through something difficult right now," Edna continued. Her voice had the careful, measured quality of a woman choosing every word before she said it. "I'm not here to make excuses for her. I just want you to understand that she hasn't been herself." Jerome listened. His face was still. Edna went on gently. She talked about Adrienne's state of mind, about the pressure she'd been under, about how she believed her daughter still had deep respect for Jerome, still thought of him as a good man. The words were soft and rounded and pointed in one direction, toward a door that Edna was hoping Jerome might crack open. Even just a little. Jerome heard all of it. He did not crack the door. He did not close it with cruelty either. He simply sat there, steady and quiet, and let Edna say what she had come to say. It was Gerald who spoke. He did not raise his voice. He did not shift forward in his chair. He spoke the way he did everything, without waste. "Edna." He said her name and waited until she looked at him. 3 years ago, at the 4th of July. You remember we had everybody out to the yard. Edna nodded slowly. I heard Adrienne on the phone in the back bedroom. Gerald's voice was even, unhurried. Didn't know who she was talking to, but I heard her clear enough. She said she'd know when it was time to leave. Said she just had to wait until the timing was right for her. The room was very still. I told myself I'd misheard, Gerald said. I held that for 3 years because I didn't want to be wrong. I wasn't wrong. Edna's hands tightened slightly over her purse. Your daughter didn't fall out of this marriage, Edna. She planned her way out of it while Jerome was still all the way in. He doesn't owe her forgiveness. He doesn't owe her a conversation. He doesn't owe her the dignity of grieving something she decided to leave before he even knew anything was wrong. Gerald said it without anger. That was the thing about it. There was no heat in his voice, no edge sharpened for the occasion. Just a man setting down a plain and heavy truth on behalf of his son. Edna sat with it. She didn't argue. She didn't defend. Whatever she had come here auditioning for, she understood now that the part wasn't available. She stayed another 10 minutes out of politeness. She hugged Paulette again at the door. She told Jerome she was glad he was doing well, and she meant it, or something close to it. Then she walked down the front steps to her car, and she drove away. Jerome and Gerald took their sweet tea to the back porch. The sun was sitting low, burning orange through the oak trees at the edge of the yard. The neighborhood was quiet. Somewhere down the block, a lawnmower ran and then stopped. Gerald looked out at the yard. "I should have told you sooner," he said. 3 years I held that. I'm sorry for the silence, son." Jerome looked at the same yard his father was looking at. The same oak trees, the same fading light. "You told me when it mattered," he said. Gerald nodded once. They sat together on the porch as the light faded slowly through the trees, two men with nothing left that needed to be said between them, and stayed there until Paulette called them in to eat. 6 months. That was all it had taken. Jerome sat at his desk before sunrise, the same way he always had, back straight, coffee at his right hand, the city still dark and quiet outside the window. The same stillness, the same controlled calm. But the door behind him read, "Director of Supply Chain Operations" in clean, gold-edged letters, and the office was twice the size of the one he'd had before. He had earned this room long before they gave it to him. The routing analysis on his screen was for a new regional contract, a partnership that would move 3 times the freight volume his team had managed 18 months ago. 2 of his junior managers, Marcus and Denise, had built the first draft overnight. It was good work. Not finished, but good. Jerome made his notations in the margins, precise and specific. The kind of feedback that told a person exactly what to fix, without making them feel small in the process. He had always known how to do that. Nobody had ever noticed until now. His phone lit up with a calendar reminder. Board advisory. Preliminary discussion. 10 a.m. The company's executive committee had floated his name 3 weeks ago. He had not chased it. He had not maneuvered for it. Someone had simply looked at what he produced and said his name in a room he wasn't in, and the invitation followed. That was how it had always worked for him, when he was working for people who were actually paying attention. The new truck was parked in the space with his name on it. It was dark gray, clean-lined, nothing extravagant, built to last and easy to maintain, which was exactly what Jerome had looked for when he bought it. He hadn't wanted something that made a statement. He had simply wanted something that was fully his, with no 9-year history underneath it, and no one else's name in the title. Practical. Chosen deliberately. That was enough. Nadia came to the Sunday dinners now. Not every week, but regularly. Often enough that Paulette had started texting her separately about what to bring, which was the highest form of welcome Paulette Watts extended. Often enough that there was a particular chair at the dinner table that had quietly become Nadia's chair without anyone deciding it. Gerald had called her Nadia after meeting her once. Not Ms. Pierre, not Jerome's friend. Just Nadia. Easy and certain, the way Gerald said the names of people he had already decided on. Jerome had noticed it and said nothing, because there was nothing to say. His father was a man who did not spend his words on people who hadn't earned them. She had earned them in the first conversation. Jerome and Nadia moved through their time together without noise or performance. They had dinner. They talked through hard problems. Hers involved load-bearing calculations for a city bridge rehabilitation project, and Jerome had opinions she found genuinely useful. They showed up for each other without being asked to explain it. Whatever they were building, it was built the right way, with patience, with honesty, with two people who already knew who they were before they found each other. It did not feel like starting over. It felt like arriving. Dominic Frazier's name had surfaced in a business journal 3 months after the divorce was finalized. The HR investigation at his company went public. Falsified sales records, redirected commission revenue. 2 former business partners had already filed civil suits that were now part of the public record. The Porsche went back. The high-rise was vacated. His Instagram account went private within 48 hours of the first article. And from what Jerome had heard secondhand, and without particular interest, Dominic had since relocated to another city. The gilded surface had cracked the moment anyone looked directly at it. Jerome had read the article once. He had not felt satisfaction, exactly. More like the quiet recognition of a pattern completing itself. A man who built everything on performance would always eventually perform in front of someone who could see through it. Adrienne was still employed, still functional, still moving through her days on the other side of town, in her cousin's apartment, in a life that looked nothing like the one she had engineered for herself. The upgrade she had planned so carefully, waited so long for, had not materialized. The man she had chosen was not who she had believed him to be, and no amount of patience or calculation had protected her from that. She had called Jerome's cell phone once, 8 weeks after the finalization, a Thursday afternoon, his phone face up on his desk. Her name appeared on the screen. He looked at it. He did not answer it. He did not block her. He simply set the phone back down and returned to what he had been doing. Now Jerome reached across his desk and picked up the framed photo. Negril. 3 years ago. The two of them on a resort balcony, the ocean behind them an impossible shade of blue. He looked at it for a moment. Not long. There was no grief in the looking, no anger, no echo of the man who had stood in a quiet kitchen holding a FedEx envelope and felt the floor tilt beneath him. That man was still Jerome. Jerome still knew where he lived. He just didn't live there anymore. He set the frame face down in the bottom drawer of his desk and slid it shut. His phone lit up on the desk in front of him. A text from Nadia. Coffee before the 8 a.m.? Jerome picked up his keys and typed back, "Already on my way." He closed the drawer. He walked out of the office and into the morning. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.